our pilot's view as he runs in over Boscombe Down Airfield in Wiltshire. It's the official Battle of Britain salute. At this airshow, the past meets the present, and the present salutes the past. More than 140,000 people have come to Boscombe Down to see the 350-plus aircraft that are gathered from all corners of the world. It's the biggest airshow in Europe this year, with 32 air arms coming together to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Battle of Britain. The show is organised by International Air Tattoo, and they're an integral part of the RAF's own charity, the Royal Air Force Benevolent Fund. The fund's president is His Royal Highness the Duke of Kent.
50 years ago this summer, Allied airmen, mainly in Spitfires and Hurricanes, fought a battle against the might of the Nazi Air Force in the skies above southern England. Most of them were young men, many of them not long out of school. Over 2,000 of the pilots were in the Royal Air Force, while others came from the armed forces of countries throughout the free world. Their courage and skill in the Battle of Britain saved our nation from defeat in the air and from the fear of invasion. It was a turning point in the war, but hundreds were to perish in that battle, and during the next 5 years, thousands more airmen were to become casualties, either killed, wounded, or posted missing in action. The Royal Air Force Benevolent Fund, of which I have the honour to be president, continues its work of helping the survivors, the disabled, the sick, and the widows and families. The need for this help is all the greater now, as sadly many of these fine people are affected by frailty and disabling illnesses. This is a daunting task for the RAF Benevolent Fund, whose appeal is designed to enable us all to help in meeting this challenge. I am delighted that the Battle of Britain Air Show at Boscombe Down is playing its part in providing support to these people whom the nation is determined never to forget. With that thought in mind, here then is the Battle of Britain salute.
An important part of that salute is an hour-long reenactment of some of the crucial aspects of the battle. It's a kind of flying theatre, a sonnet avion if you like, or a royal tournament with real aeroplanes. It starts with a graphic representation of the number of nationalities involved. Each of these parachutists, they're from the Joint Services Parachuting Club at Netheravon, each of them is carrying the flag of one of the 13 other nations from which the pilots in the battle came. They ranged from one Jamaican, and incidentally one Jew from what was later to become Israel, to no less than 141 pilots from Poland. Also represented are the flags of the British air arms involved, the RAF and the Fleet Air Arm. Of course, it wasn't only pilots that were needed. Lorries like these came trundling into the recruit training schools all over the country, full of young men and women who were to provide the backbone of support for the pilots and the aeroplanes. In that hot summer of 1940, 4/5 of the total Luftwaffe strength were ranged against Britain, more than 2,600 aircraft based on the nearby continent. More than half of those were bombers. Sadly, none of them are nowadays in flying conditions suitable for this airshow, so their presence is represented by two of the famous Messerschmitt 109 fighters, of which there were more than 800 in the battle. But before today's battle starts, let's look at a problem that every squadron suffered. Most of the new pilots streaming in had trained on old, slow biplanes. Some of them had as few as 5 hours' experience on the Spitfire, which apart from anything else was tricky to take off. There were no two-seater Spitfires in those days, so the first thing a new pilot did was to get airborne with a more experienced mentor chasing him and harrying him.
Red 3, I'm going to come at you from out of the sun. I want you to try and lose me. Red 3, water. Come on, Red 3, I've had you in my sights at harmonization room. You're dead, boy.
In fact, maybe it's a good thing the Sprague pilot has left the circuit, because arriving now is a very important Hurricane. In it is the boss, the AOC 11 Group, Air Vice Marshal Keith Park. In the very best traditions of leadership, he refused to stay desk-bound at his headquarters at Uxbridge. Instead, well, let him explain it himself.
I spent every afternoon from after I thought the main attacks were over, 4 or 5 o'clock, I went out to the Northolt Aerodrome every afternoon in the week and climbed into my old Hurricane and flew around some of the aerodromes every day, 7 days a week, in order to talk to the pilots, the flight commanders, squadron commanders, to see how they were standing the strain, because I was caning them, I was working them to the limit of their physical and mental capacity.
Air Marshal Park always wore a white flying suit on these occasions. Today his part is played by Group Captain Martin Widdowson, who commands RAF Coningsby. But anyway, the Air Marshal wasn't always right when he expected the day's raids to be over. And this time they mean business.
Young men going forth every morn to guard their native land and all that we stand for, holding in their hands these instruments of colossal and shattering power, of whom it may be said that every morn brought forth a noble chance, and every chance brought forth a noble night, deserve our gratitude, as do all the brave men.
This was the kind of sight that people all over southern England would rush out of their houses to see. Of course, for them, the dogfights were more distant, often at heights around 20,000 feet. Today's audience gets a more grandstand view as the pilots dogfight much closer to the ground. But what was it like actually to destroy an enemy aircraft? This is how one of the great Battle of Britain heroes, Squadron Leader Ginger Lacey, described his first kill.
I suddenly saw a Heinkel on a Messerschmitt 109. Being 23 at the time, I felt very lonely, but I attacked for the first time. According to the book, I had to open the throttle fully, which I did, but the Messerschmitt was only cruising, so I overshot underneath him, doing about 100 miles an hour more than he was, and I never fired a shot. Luckily, he didn't see me, and I was able to do a complete orbit, coming in behind him again. I threw the book away this time and throttled back so that I was almost formating behind him. As I opened fire, he blew up right in front of me, a most spectacular sight. This, of course, convinced me that I was the hottest thing in the air that had ever happened. So I went down and attacked the Heinkel. This caught fire in a really satisfactory sort of way. and I returned to the airfield cock-a-hoop. I was not quite so cock-a-hoop when nobody believed me. That was my introduction to air fighting.
Ginger Lacey went on to achieve no less than 28 kills during the war, 18 of them during the Battle of Britain. In fact, from the looks of this Messerschmitt, it's about to become one of those kill statistics. And this is the guy that did it. There's the smoking result. The other sight that people prayed for at the end of a dogfight was the victory roll from the winner. Often when the throttle was closed on the Merlin engine, it would pop and bang, sometimes giving the uninitiated slight palpitations. Well, that's a brief look at the reenactment of those events of 50 years ago. Ever since then, Britain has thought it necessary to have a properly planned air defence capability. One of the squadrons here at Boscombe in the battle was number 56. They're still at it now, but their mounts are American McDonnell Douglas Phantom FGR-2s. And this is what a 56 Squadron scramble looks like today. So here are 4 of the Phantoms of 56 Squadron breaking from Echelon Port. So that's what some of the present-day incarnations of the few are flying. Let's take a look now at some of the other current fighter hardware. This one is the latest version of an aircraft that has proved itself in combat, but it's also become a firm favourite with airshow audiences. It's the Harrier II, and it claims a direct line of descent from the Hurricane. As you'd expect from a modern fighter, it's fast and agile. But the thing that always amazes people, no matter how many times they see it, is that it can come to a full stop and perform like a helicopter. Of course, that's not just a crowd puller. The ability to take off and land almost anywhere that's flattish is important to the military. Hence, for instance, the US Marines have this aircraft, as does the Royal Navy and the RAF. That version of the Harrier, the GR5, is mostly for ground attack, that's to say hitting things on the ground rather than in the air. This aircraft does nothing else. It's a sort of one-off design that came about because the US forces discovered in Vietnam that they didn't have anything that would do that job satisfactorily. These are A-10 Thunderbolts, known to their friends as tank busters, or rather unflatteringly, warthogs. They have huge firepower, a cannon that's 20 times more powerful than the aircraft guns in World War II. It fires an astonishing 4,200 rounds a minute. That's 70 explosive shells every second. The A-10 also carries 28 bombs, including laser-guided smart bombs or Maverick missiles. But Warthog is on the way out, and believe it or not, its purposeful, functional shape, well, ugly if you insist, that squat shape is to be replaced by this graceful object. This is not one of your tank busters, or mud movers as they say in the trade. This is an air defence fighter, a true follower of the Hurricane and Spitfire tradition. This is an F-16, American-built but belonging to the Royal Netherlands Air Force. See its Sidewinder missiles on the wings there. They're for shooting down other aeroplanes. Well, actually, only the inboard ones are Sidewinders, dummies of course. The things right on the wingtips are smoke generators just for the display. And this, or rather a toughened ground attack version of this, will soon take over from the A-10 Warthog. And this fire-breathing monster is another ground attack fighter or light bomber, and for ground Reed Sea attack as well. This is the Seppercat Jaguar with its rather duck-like undercarriage. It was one of the early joint projects between Britain and France. It was built in the 60s by a joint company specially set up by Breguet of France and BAC of Britain. It's still in service with several other countries, as well as Britain and France. As Jaguar flies by at very low speed, you can clearly see that lump on the tail fin there. That's the aerial for the radar warning receiver, which tells the pilot when he's being scanned by another radar. And here's an aircraft that owes its continued existence to the Jaguar. In the 70s, the French Navy was going to replace its carrier-borne fighter bomber, the Étendard, that means standard, with a special naval version of the Jaguar. That never came about, partly because the British half of the team wasn't interested. So the French developed this, the Super Étendard. It was Argentine Étendards that caused so much damage to the British fleet in the Falklands with their Exocet missiles. Anyway, you can see the arrestor hook under the tail there for carrier landings and the refueling probe above the nose. This is an American General Dynamics F-111C, and it belongs to the Australian Air Force. It's about to give us a demonstration of what used to be called variable geometry. This is how the swing wing works. As Flight Lieutenant Mark Skidmore banks the F-111 to show us its plan-formed silhouette, the wings are in the fully forward position, swept back just 16 degrees. And as he starts turning towards us, you can see they swept right back to 73 degrees of sweepback. And the F-111 really looks like a paper dart. But that's not the only spectacular demonstration that Flight Lieutenant Skidmore has for us. One of the peculiarities of the F-111 is that the dump valve for losing fuel when you need to lose weight quickly is right between the jet pipes. So if you dump fuel while the afterburners are going, that's certainly some paint stripper. Another swing-wing aircraft here, this one British, and German and Italian. It's the Panavia Tornado, built jointly by British Aerospace, MBB of Germany, incidentally that M still stands for Messerschmitt, and Air Italia of Italy. With the wings swept forward at 25 degrees here, and the wheels down incidentally, Flight Lieutenant Fred Grundy of the RAF's 229 Operational Conversion Unit does an immaculate slow roll. As he rolls out, you can see the rails for the Sidewinder missiles under the wings. It's an interesting problem keeping them facing in the right direction as the sweepback changes. And here it is, changed to full 65 degrees sweepback, making the Tornado look quite dart-like in its turn. A flash of condensation cloud there showing how low the pressure is on the top of the wing as the aircraft pulls its 20-odd tons weight upwards. Flight Lieutenant Martin Parker, the navigator, obviously enjoying himself, as Fred Grundy demonstrates a unique feature of the Tornado, those so-called buckets that reverse the thrust of the engines for shorter landings. One of the striking things about this airshow is the number of formations to be seen. We'll take a closer look at 3 of them now, with another 2 to come later. These are a group that you won't often see in this country. They're McDonnell Douglas CF-18A Hornets of the Canadian Armed Forces. They've come over from 439 TAC Fighter Squadron at Baden-Sollingen in Germany, and they're at the show to commemorate the 90 Canadians who flew in the Battle of Britain, 20 of whom died in the battle. Next, one of the national aerobatic teams. These are the Casa 101 Aviajets of the Spanish Air Force. They are the Team Aguila, Eagle Team. All 7 of them do a lovely formation takeoff. Notice how the rear section of 3 gets airborne before the first 4. Those St Andrews crosses on the tail show that these aircraft come from the Spanish Central Flying Academy. Although the show is highly professional, the pilots are only part-time formation team members. They have to practice at the beginning and end of their normal working day as advanced flying instructors. As with all formation aerobatic teams, there are plenty of wonderful photo opportunities for the audience. The best are usually when the teams do what they call their breaks. Canadians, who we saw just now, are not the only people to have the Hornet. The Team Aguila have a formation shaped after the Hornet, and it's from that shape that they do their final fan break. Now these gents are even more part-time than the Spanish. They are the Patrouille Suisse, the Swiss national aerobatic team. 3/4 of the Swiss Air Force are part-time militia anyway, mostly with other civilian flying jobs, it must be said. But anyway, the Patrouille Suisse gets to practice just once a week on Monday mornings. And this year they're doing 4 displays, 1 in Italy, 2 in Switzerland, and of course 1 here at Boscombe Down. The great thing about the Swiss Air Force, though, for the older aviation buffs, is that they still fly the Hawker Hunter, one of those links in the chain between the Hurricane and the Harrier. The Hunter is universally recognised as one of the great early jet fighters. It dates from 1951, and it was at one time the holder of the world speed record. Here, with the main formation of the Patrouille Suisse going in one direction and a solo heading towards it, is what's universally known amongst aerobatic teams as a goose. This show is actually the first occasion on which Boscombe Down has opened its gates for a public air display. Until now, security here has been as tight as a drum, with 2 quite separate security fences. It's where the military test their aircraft and armaments and work on the sophisticated electronics that go into today's warplanes. But it was also a Battle of Britain fighter station. It was from here that the only Victoria Cross awarded to a fighter command pilot was won. This Hurricane bears the markings GNA of Flight Lieutenant James Nicholson, who won the VC for pressing home an attack whilst severely burnt in the skies over Southampton. Post-war history at Boscombe saw such highlights as the early flights of TSR-2, the tactical strike and reconnaissance aircraft that was to replace the Canberra. The whole project was scrapped on government orders in 1966, just days before the second prototype was due to fly. Here's another aircraft right on the cutting edge of contemporary technology, taking off from another secret base, this time the so-called Lockheed Skunk Works in California. This is the highly secret F-117A, the stealth fighter. This is the extraordinary shape, along with the use of non-reflecting surfaces, that enable this very expensive piece of technology virtually to avoid detection by conventional radars. Well, let's turn our attention from the esoteric and secretive to the almost blatant showmanship of Richard Good and the brand new Proteus Extra 350. Let's get the name sorted out first. Proteus is the petrol company that sponsors this and other exciting aircraft. Extra is the name of the German Walter Extra, who designs and builds these World Championship class aerobatic aircraft. And 350, well, with only a little imagination, that's the horsepower of the Lycoming engine. As for Richard Good, well, he's a very tough cookie. In this display, he puts himself through +8G when his body weighs 3/4 of a ton, to -6G when there's a half-ton force trying to pull him out of his straps. Watch here as he does a tail slide. With the aeroplane going straight up, he cuts the power and holds it straight. The speed drops off to 0, and then still pointing upwards, the aeroplane slides backwards before it tips over. You have to hold the controls very firmly because with backwards airflow they can be slammed onto their limiting stops and damaged. No damage here though, and Richard now performs a beautiful rolling tail slide, more properly known as a torque turn. See how he keeps the roll going as the speed drops off, so that even by the time he's going backwards, he's still rolling. As you might expect, Richard Good has his own upside-down way of taking his leave of the Spitfires that are here for the salute. We've actually got 13 of them today, as well as 2 Hurricanes. It would never have been possible to get this many historic aircraft together in flying condition without years of dedicated care and attention to their needs. In a small hangar on the edge of a field in North Hampshire, half a dozen men spend their working lives repairing and restoring Spitfires, and even building them from new. It's all run by Dick Melton, who used to be an RAF mechanic, and his wife Carol and their staff of 6. Between them, they rebuild the past. They painstakingly put back together the shattered stuff that dreams are made of. Under their hands, new Spitfires emerge phoenix-like from the rubble of neglect, disrepair and catastrophe.
I was a very young man when these aeroplanes did the deeds that they were renowned for having done. I have an enormous emotional attachment for these aeroplanes because of what they did. We're now 50 years on. These aeroplanes do not do that anymore, but these aeroplanes perpetuate the memory of those men and those deeds. On the other hand, to me, this is a beautiful piece of machinery. I like to think that this particular piece of machinery will be looked on in the future the same way that we look on maybe a Chippendale chair. They are not purely a machine. They are a piece of artistry, and this is what we do, and I'm very, very proud of it.
It takes 2 years to rebuild a Spitfire, and it costs well over £500,000. Modern materials and construction techniques help considerably. But Spitfire parts are so scarce that the only genuine piece of the original airframe might be the identification plate.
I used to say years and years ago that if I had a piece of aeroplane, then I could reconstruct a new aeroplane around it. I say very much in jest these days that if you give me a data plate, I can build an aeroplane around it.
There is, of course, another sacred original, the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine. But actually, so many Merlins were made that Dick says getting hold of them and restoring them is really the easy bit. Easy or hard to restore, though, the Spitfire of the 90s looks, flies and sounds just like the Spitfire of the 40s. We welcome you back to Boscombe Down with the one ingredient that no big air show in Britain can do without, the Royal Air Force aerobatic team, the Red Arrows, in their 9 British Aerospace Red Hawks. Here they've taken off in 2 sections, a 5 and a 4, and they're getting together into that basic immaculate diamond shape that has become a byword for aerobatic precision. From the diamond, though, they change into all sorts of other shapes, like this, the feathered arrow. A lot of their formation shapes depict other aircraft types. This one's called Tornado. Now they change into a new shape for this year, named after the Soviet fighter Flanker, with its small canard wing at the front. This is called Apollo, after the American spaceship. And here's another new shape for this year, T-Tango. That's a especially difficult formation in which to do a roll like this, because it's very tricky for the pilots in the straight front row to keep position. termed the synchro pair because of their synchronized as opposed to formation aerobatics, and this is a new maneuver for them. They call it the revolver. And here comes another goose, only this time with a pair instead of a singleton. The Red Arrows are a full-time display team, although they do have a war role in which their aircraft would quickly be camouflaged and remodified to carry missiles and guns. But each year in October, they start out with 6 team members from the season just finished and 3 new members. They train throughout the winter and they get their clearance for their display in April. Between then and the end of September, they do more than 100 displays. This year, they've broken new ground by going to Moscow. And of course the Arrows have their favourite spine-tingling moments like this, the Vixen break. In some contrast, here's a complete newcomer to the British air show scene. It's Czechoslovakian, and as with the Canadians and the Australians, it's at the show to commemorate the 87 Czech pilots who flew with great distinction in the Battle of Britain. 7 of them died in the battle. But the L410 Turbolet light transport aircraft is a good performer in its own right. For one thing, you can see how manoeuvrable it is as test pilot Vladimir Vulk sideslips it on the approach. Not only that, but he seems almost to be able to loop it. Very untransport-like. But the Turbolet's real forte is short landings, helped in this instance by immaculate positioning by Vladimir Vulk. Listen for the 3 squeaks as the wheels touch almost simultaneously. And instantly, it's stopped. Of course, that landing was helped by the reverse thrust of the propellers. And here, Vladimir is using differential reverse to spin his little beauty on a sixpence, or should that be a krona? And talking of odd things to do with an aeroplane, how's this for size? Like some great child's toy, doesn't it? Or perhaps a begging dog with its front paws tucked under in supplication. What it actually is a Boeing Chinook HC-1 of number 240 Operational Conversion Unit at Odium in Hampshire. And the man doing these odd things with it is Flight Lieutenant Peter Ward, who's an instructor on the OCU. Anyway, having got airborne again, even if it was a bit of a weird way to do it, the next thing seems to be to throw this 15-odd tons of helicopter at the ground again. Doesn't look very comfortable, does it? On a more serious note, these Chinooks are amazingly rugged. After 3 of them were lost in the Falklands when the Atlantic conveyor was sunk, the one remaining Chinook just kept going through all the appalling weather and with an almost total absence of spare parts. Its maximum capacity is supposed to be 80 passengers, but in emergency it was carrying well over 100. Now, if you're looking for more demonstrations of manoeuvrability, this is not the place to find them. People have suggested, very unkindly, that this monster only gets airborne by courtesy of the curvature of the Earth. This is another Boeing product, although rather older than the Chinook. In fact, it dates from the early 50s in its original form. It is the B-52, the Buffy, or the Stratofortress. But this is what's taking over from the Buffy. This is the Rockwell International B-1B. And those 4 General Electric engines produce almost 32,000 pounds of static thrust each. That means that each one is nearly 6 times as powerful as the engine in a Red Arrow's Hawk. And you may be able to see there that the B-1B is another swing-wing aircraft, and its wings are now back to the full 67.5 degrees of sweep back. Both of those aircraft belong to SAC Strategic Air Command, and SAC needs airborne refuelers like this KC-135R. That's the refueling boom waving up and down. It's actually controlled by an operator in the back of the tanker, and he uses the manoeuvrability of the boom to place it precisely onto the refueling point of the receiving aircraft. But anyway, here's the B-52, not in need of fuel today, but back for a fast pass by the airfield. And here's its British equivalent, which, as you can see, is rather more manoeuvrable. It's the Vulcan. Mind you, before we start feeling too superior, let's not forget that the B-52 is still in service, and this Vulcan is the only one left flying after the Vulcan squadrons were disbanded in 1984. Every season we hear that it's going to be the last one for the Vulcan, but we're always grateful to see its graceful shape again the next year. There's the capacious bomb bay, which could hold 21,000 pounds of conventional bombs and get them to the Falkland Islands to drop them on Port Stanley runway. And here's an even more venerable lady, although not quite going back to Battle of Britain days. The Avro Lancaster, one of only 2 left flying anywhere. Another look at a sizable bomb bay there. Although the Battle of Britain was over before the Lancaster came on the scene, this one belongs to the RAF's Battle of Britain Memorial Flight, and it flies as a permanent tribute to all the aircrew who lost their lives in World War II. Nearly 7,400 Lancasters were built during and just after the war, and almost half of those were lost on operations. And here's the last of our major formations. It's a great pleasure to welcome the French national team, the Patrie de France, on one of their rare visits to Britain. This is their diamond formation, and here's an interesting variation that's new this year. 3 the right way up, 5 inverted. Great panache. The aircraft they fly is the joint Franco-German Alpha Jet, built by Dassault and Dornier, and it competes for the same markets as the Red Arrow's Hawk. Pulling up in Big Arrow there, and here's their smaller formation after 2 solo aircraft have split off. At the top of this manoeuvre, another of those brakes that raise the hairs on the back of your neck, the bomb burst. And prepare yourself for another, even more exotic break. the French version of the rollbacks. You may remember the Red Arrows do it in pairs, one from each side of the formation. Well, the French do it alternately. But now, as two Vics of 3 split on their way up, I think this is my favourite manoeuvre of the whole season. It's a heart shape they're describing. Several teams do that, but nobody has a heart quite like the French. Look for the arrow piercing the heart. The two solos, Capitaine Didier Bosser and Capitaine Patrick Louis, who are making that arrow, even get the smoke right, so they really do pierce it. C'est formidable. Back to earth with a bump now. Enough of this romantic French nonsense. Let's have some solid British practicality. Well, I say British. This is an RAF aircraft, but it's an American C-130 Hercules, and it's doing an approach that the Americans perfected in Vietnam, the Khe Sanh tactical approach. As he stops, watch the ramp at the back. The C-130 is probably the most versatile aircraft in the world. Although many of its users, like the RAF, are the conventional armed services of nations everywhere, one of its more unlikely roles is with the US Coast Guard alongside their amphibious helicopter fleet. The Coast Guard is engaged in its own particular battle, a battle that's very different from 50 years ago. Now the enemies are the drug barons. On an average day, the Coast Guard seizes 3,500 pounds of marijuana and cocaine, much of it from Central America.
Well, I'll give him a pass to the right anyways.
Okay, or there's another guy over at 1 o'clock also.
Big?
Medium. Is that guy over there? It looks like he's any kind of wolf on him, or...
Well, I don't know. We can certainly go check them.
Any boat in these waters is suspect and can be checked out. In the front line of this drugs war is the Coast Guard's 7th District in Florida. They've got both conventional fixed-wing aircraft and helicopters, and their operations are coordinated by a command center in Miami and 5 group commands like this one at Clearwater on Florida's prosperous western seaboard. These C-130s fly round the clock with the flight crews changing on a hot seat basis. A fresh crew takes over while the engines keep running ready for the next sortie. Patrolling the Florida coastline, the C-130s have a range of 2,600 miles, and they can stay up for 14 hours at a stretch. But after each mission, it's a dousing in the biggest car wash in the business to get rid of all that salt water. Much of the Coast Guard's time is spent on practice drills. Flight crews link up with armed boat crews who are really at the sharp end of the drugs interception business. They have to be prepared all the time for the unexpected, whether it's big ships needing urgent spares or small craft in trouble. The training also includes picking up dummy drug consignments which the C-130s dump into the sea.
Rescue checklist complete. Ready for 1 trail line. Way back delivery to imaginary target.
Okay, picking imaginary target. Go on out like you're coming in.
Port right. Easy. Hold. Way back is at door's edge. Prepare to move back to left 5. Roger. Way back inside the cabin. Way back disconnected.
Since 1972, Florida Coast Guards working in the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean have seized more than 10,000 tons of drugs worth billions of dollars. They have fast pursuit planes with advanced tracking systems which give them the edge on light aircraft trying to ship the drugs in.
He's right on the nose. Going down. That last time coming across the drop.
There the operator has electronically marked the spot where the illegal load has been dropped.
He's climbing.
And no, this isn't the result of drug baron sabotage. They really do have amphibious helicopters. So the war goes on round Florida. Back in Britain, it's a different sort of struggle to support the people who gave their all in the Battle of Britain. The Spitfires and Hurricanes are coming to the end of their salute pageant. Between June and October 1940, 2,949 aircrew took part in the Battle of Britain. All but 600 were in the RAF. As we've seen, others came from Australia, Canada, Czechoslovakia, France, the United States. In all, 14 nations fought the battle on the Allied side. In the words of the poem, the average Battle of Britain pilot was a common, unconsidered man who for a moment of time held the whole future of mankind in his two sweating palms and did not let it fall. 503 aircrew were killed in the battle. They're represented here by 503 new recruits lined up on parade.
The gratitude of every home in our island, in our empire, and indeed throughout the world, except in the abodes of the guilty, goes out to the British airmen who, undaunted by odds, unwearied in their constant challenge and mortal danger, are turning the tide of the world war by their prowess and by their devotion. Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few.
This air show commemorates the Battle of Britain and all those who fought in it. We salute them. Well, that's it from Boscombe Down on this 50th anniversary salute. We leave you in the pilot's seat of a Spitfire 50 years on in the sunny skies over southern Britain.